From Cape Breton, it's Saturday night, and I am so excited to explore this topic tonight. If you're new here, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. I post a video here at least once a week, if not twice a week, sometimes a little bit more depending on what's going on. If you're new to the podcast, make sure you follow me. I do post a new podcast episode every week. And this week we are talking about Mr. Notorious himself, Al Capone. And the reason I chose Al Capone this week is simply because of the Valentine's Day Massacre that occurred in Chicago in 1929. That was a massive event in the history of the United States, in the history of gangsters, in the history of civil society. So I thought, what better way to celebrate and continue to celebrate love in the month of love of February by talking about this major event, this major dude, and let's just get into it. Al Capone. So Al Capone, I'm just going to grab my notes because there's a lot. And I can't remember everything off by heart. So I'll be real with you guys. I mean, I'm sure everybody makes notes out there. So I just wrote down my notes and we're going to go through them. But first, some coffee. I got a beautiful candle burning. If you're not watching on YouTube, head over to YouTube and check it out. This candle, it's pretty bright on screen, but it is called Magic Spell and it's Charmed Aroma, and I got a beautiful ring out of it, and it smells divine. So we'll just burn that off to the side, and we'll talk about Al Capone. So his birth name was Alphonse Gabriel Capone, and of course, you gotta shorten that shit, right? So Al was the name he pretty much always went by, but there were a few names that were given to him or he picked up over the years. One of those, which we'll touch on in more detail later, is Scarface. By the way, apparently, according to one of the articles I read, he hated the nickname Scarface. And yet there's at least one, if not two, movies and some shows about Scarface. Anyway, some of the other nicknames he picked up are Snorky. I'm not sure why he would have picked that up, but I did read in one of the articles, and I read a few, that he was high on cocaine a lot. So was that from snorting? Snorky? Snorky? I don't know. The big fella. He wasn't that tall. He was only 5'10" and a half. King Alphonse. All right. Big head, maybe. Public enemy number 1. Okay, well, he did go down in history as one of the most notorious gangsters. Big Al. Again, with the big. Some of these maybe he gave himself. You know? I'm not here to nitpick and pick apart, roast, or do any of those things to Al Capone. I mean, R.I.P., right? I don't want to speak ill of the dead, but some of these things it makes you think, makes you wonder. So, Mr. Big Fella himself was born January 17th, Al Capone was born January 17th, 1899. I couldn't spit that out. He was first generation American. His parents came over from Italy, and they came over, I believe, in 1893, but I'm not 100% sure on the date. I think it was around 1893, just a few years before Al Capone was born, and they settled in Brooklyn, New York. And that's where Al Capone really started the majority of his life, from growing up to his early gangster days. In the 6th grade, at age 14, now around here, in most schools, when you're in the 6th grade, you're usually 12. So does that mean that he was held back a few years? Or does that mean that the school system and curriculum was a little different in the early 1900s? That could be true. I have no idea. So, anyway, he was 14 in the 6th grade, and he left school at that time. And he just didn't just leave school like some people around here left school very early, like 4th, 5th, 6th grade. But that was to go work in the mines or work at the steel plant or help around the farm, help around the house, those kinds of things. No. Al Capone left school after beating on a teacher, his teacher, who was female. And not that that really means anything, but doctors who analyzed and really, who studied Al Capone, who did tests on him, did say that he was a born sociopath. Again, I'm not here to judge, I'm not here to speak ill, but, I mean, his life kind of led that way, didn't it? And to beat on a female teacher, we don't know the circumstances, we don't know what was said. Maybe he was just in a mood. We have no idea. And again, I'm not here to speculate or judge. But that is what happened. So, after leaving school in the 6th grade at age 14, he then joins a pretty notorious in New York gang called the James Street Gang. And the James Street Gang was his lead into meeting Torrio. So when Al Capone left school in the 6th grade, he joined the James Street Gang. And this was led at the time by Torrio. I think I'm saying that name right. There's a lot of Italian names and stuff that maybe I won't be saying right, but just forgive me. Again, let's not judge anybody, right? And take a shot every time I say anyways and right. You'd be pretty drunk by the end of this episode. Let's move on. So he joined that gang, and then let's move into like his gangster life, because that's the majority of his life. The majority of Al Capone is gangster. Straight up. I will get into a number of movies and TV shows, even some podcasts, and all that stuff later on. Because his life was basically gangster. Did I say that weird? Did I have an accent there? Maybe I always have an accent. Okay. So we mentioned Torrio. The leader of the gang was John Torrio. Another member of the gang, which we'll only mention once here, was Lucky Luciano. And he was also known for his own notoriety. I looked him up, but I really wanted to focus on Al Capone, so maybe some other day we'll go back to Lucky and we'll talk more about him, because I think the life of a gangster, even though I'd never want to live the life of a gangster myself, that's not for me. I don't think gangs are cool at all, but these early 1900s gangsters and the movies, and I don't know, I just find it intriguing, very interesting to learn about. So, at age 16, so he leaves school at 14, now he's 16, and he's left the James Street Gang, and he's now joined, I don't know why I'm getting a, okay, I think I'm better, maybe. He left the James Street Gang, and he joined the 5 Points Gang. And this was under Frankie Yale. And there was a longer, more detailed name that was a kind of nickname for this guy, Frankie Yale, so we'll go with that. I looked at his full name and I was like, yeah, no. Not today. Not today. At this time, Capone got into a fight. So what happened was Capone was kind of like I said earlier, he had a big head, and he went up to a young woman, and he said something not so gentlemanly to this young woman. Oh my goodness. Anyway, so he says something crude to this young woman and maybe trying to get somewhere with her or something. At 16, he's working in this little establishment called the Harvard Inn at, I believe it, I'm not sure where. Maybe in New York, maybe at Yale. It was the manager, the bartender there was Frankie Yale. So anyway, Capone says this nasty shit to this young woman, and the young woman's brother is there. And he's not so fond of this interaction going on. So he tells Capone, man, you gotta apologize to her. And Capone says, no, not gonna do it. Why should I apologize? So this dude, this brother of this young woman, he was kind of known in the area for knife fights and stuff. So he goes after Capone for not apologizing, and he swipes at him with a blade, with a razor, and he gets Al Capone in the face. And that leaves, hence, the Scarface. So Al Capone, then, months later, he's healed, he's fine, he's got a scar, he doesn't like the nickname Scarface he's been given. So he finds this guy at a restaurant, goes up to him, and blows his brains out. I thought it was an eye for an eye, not a scar for a death. Like, seriously, this guy obviously had issues. Major issues. He was also pretty smart. We'll go into that. So Al Capone got in the fight, he got the scar. Then, by age 21, so this dude, Al Capone, goes from being a 14-year-old kid joining a gang, probably thinking he's all that, to being a 16-year-old kid getting slashed in the face, to being a 21-year-old young fella who then gets involved in a number of violent crimes. Well, dude, he was never on the right path, obviously. So he gets involved in a number of violent crimes. He murdered a guy for the winnings on a craps game. Like, how much could he have gotten from this guy? He stole the money after he killed the dude. So what did he get? Like $50? $100? Not worth it. Then he left a member of a rival gang dead. And with retaliation promised, Frankie Vale said, dude, Capone, you just gotta go. You need to go. So Yale talked to Torino. Torino's now in Chicago. He moved to Chicago in what's my notes say? Like 1909 or something? Or 19... Let's see. I'm just scanning. I didn't put it in. But I think it was 1909. And so Yale says to Torino, you gotta take Capone. So Capone goes to Chicago and joins the Colosimo, the Colosimo gang. And, oh yeah, here it is. So Torino left New York in 1909 to run a brothel business under Big Jim Colosimo, yeah. So Capone's invited to go and work under Torino in this gang, Colosimo Mob. And he's now the influential lieutenant of this mob. So he goes from being this kid in a bar, just kind of like working, doing whatever, to being an influential lieutenant of a mob in Chicago. Talk about riding high, and no wonder he was called Big Al, Big Head. So, during the Prohibition, there was illegal brewing, distilling of beer and liquor. Capone kind of saw these as growth industries. But he also wanted to have legit businesses, probably to launder money and shit. But anyway, he had legit business interests. He had a number of cleaning services and that kind of thing. I'm not really 100% sure of what he had, how many, but he had these businesses in order to kind of garnish public relations. So this put him in touch with public officials. It put him in touch with labor unions and employee associations. So he kind of had his hands in a lot of different things, right? That were influential in society. I mean, we're talking about the Great Depression. We're talking about Prohibition. We're talking about all these things. There's a lot of repression. So with Al Capone, not only was he a mobster, who, of course, there's brothels, there's drugs, there's bootlegging, illegal liquor, all these things, all these negative things, killing, murder, terrible things. But then he puts himself like adjacent to people who make big decisions legally, or maybe not legally. Maybe they were in on it. We don't know. There's no conspiracy here. I am not, throwing any ideas out there. I'm just saying. We don't know. Unless you were part of that industry, unless you were part of that experience, you have no idea. So, sorry for the throat clearing and coughing. No clue. Now, I was outside this morning, snow blowing. We got some freezing rain and snow last night. A little bit of weather, not massive. But that meant I had to go out this morning and clear my driveway. Loved doing it, but I think that's where I caught a little, I don't know what it is going on, but it's going. I added a little cinnamon to my coffee today. It really should have Bailey's in it though. But I don't know if I want to go drive after this, so I don't drink and drive. Absolutely don't. Okay, let's get back to this. Let's see. Where was I? Public relations. Okay, so next point. So, with these public relations and stuff, Torino was able to become, not with the public relations. Another point. Torino, now let me see, I made a few points on this because I really wanted to dive into it a little bit more. And I thought I made a bigger point on it, but maybe not. I did read over these, but you know how it goes. Okay. So Torino was able to become the leader of the Colosimo mob with a violent death of Jim Colosimo at the hands of either Yale or Capone. Now, this was in 1920. That would make Capone 21 years old. And he's already committing, major murder here. It's such a waste. I mean, he's a good-looking fella. Such a waste. However, I digress. As the right-hand man to Torino, Capone gained lots of experience and expertise under him, while Torino, of course, was lead on this mob. In 1924, Torino, Yale, and Capone murdered a gang leader, Dion O'Banion, in his flower shop. O'Banion's associates, Jaime Weiss and George Bugs Moran, tried killing Torrio in retaliation. By 1925, Capone had taken over as leader after Torrio was seriously wounded in an assassination attempt. So he went from, let's back up, let's regroup here. He went from 14 years old, would have put him 1915? 1913. So 1913, he's leaving school. By 1925, he's now the leader of a mob. That's 12 years. That's crazy. That to me blows my mind right there. How young and already leading a mob? Okay, so 1926. We're moving on. Capone went into hiding for 3 months after killing Miss McSwiggan, who was an assistant state attorney. And he was just out drinking with friends. And when he came out of the bar and he was walking, that's when Capone killed him. But it was not on purpose. Oops, no. Capone was actually aiming for a rival gang. And McSwiggan kind of just got in the way. This is why gangs are bad. Shooting is bad. Killing is bad. All of that is bad. I am so glad I live where I live. Cape Breton Island. Not saying there's not crime here. That is not what I'm saying, because don't come for me. I know there's going to be people in there thinking that's what I'm saying, but I'm not. We do have crime, but not like any of this. Oh dear. And I know that this shit still goes on. I'm not naive. I know that there are places in the world where there's bad shit that still happens in this kind of way, where one person is wounded or killed, then there's a retaliation against the other side, and back and forth until you friggin' kill everybody. I digress again. I'm going on a tangent here. Okay, so McSwiggan was killed, but Capone kind of skated on that because I pretty much denied it and there were no witnesses, so the police really didn't have anything to hold him on. 1927. Capone was rumored to be worth over $100 million US. In 1927, that would have made him 28 years old, and he was worth over $100 million. That part makes me a little jealous. Not gonna lie. That makes me a little jealous. Okay, not all was bad. Let's get into some of the good stuff Capone did. So we talked about all the murders and all the drugs and all the brothels and Prohibition and bootlegging during the Prohibition. Let's talk about some good stuff. So, Capone was the first to open a free soup kitchen in Chicago at the beginning of the Great Depression. He also arranged to buy clothing for the needy. He would regularly attend baseball games. His arrival would be met with applause from the public. He would also sign autographs. Al Capone played semi-professional baseball from 1916 to 1918. Now let's think about that for a second, kids. 1916, he was also a gangster. So while he's this massive gangster getting a big head, he's also playing semi-pro baseball. Whoa. He would often pay. I'm still stuck on the fact that he played baseball while being a gangster. Okay. He would often pay the hospital bills of innocent people who got hurt during the course of his activities. Alright, so you footed the bill after somebody got hurt. Okay. Whatever. Maybe don't shoot him up in the first place. Now let's get to the end. We're going to talk about the Valentine's Day Massacre very quickly. And actually, let's get into that before we talk about the demise and the end of Al Capone. The Valentine's Day Massacre. February 14th, 1929. Chicago, Illinois. 7 members of George Bugs Moran's gang were brutally shot by a machine gun in a garage by, I'm going to use quotes, Capone, by his gang, posing as police officers. The victims included gang members. Now I have to read these directly because some of them are names I'm going to have a hard time pronouncing. Gang members: Adam Hayer, Frank Gusenberg, Pete Gusenberg, John May, Al Weinshank, and James Clark. They weren't too bad, actually. As well as visitor Dr. Reinhard H. Schwimmer. So, in all of that, Al Capone actually wanted to kill Bugs himself, but he missed. Al Capone also was smart. He made sure he had an alibi. He was down in Florida in his summer home in Florida, so he had an alibi, and he wasn't anywhere near the site when this Bugs guy was shot to death. However, Bugs, George Bugs Moran, he was walking up to the place, this warehouse garage thing, and he noticed this police officer's car out front, so he's like, nah, I'm a gangster. I can't be associated with the cops. And he sneaks into a storefront, into a store, and he hides out there until the police officers are gone. Little did he know he was minutes away from walking in and getting shot himself. Lucky dude. He should have been named Lucky. Next we have, we'll get into some quotes and some movies after we talk about the end then. So the end of Al Capone. Al Capone was, pardon me, let's see. Well, they tried to capture him a few times, more than a few times. I mean, throughout his massive gangster career, the feds really tried to get him. But what they ended up getting him on was tax evasion. I mean, if they can't pin murder on him, next best thing is tax evasion because it's a federal crime. So June 5th, 1931, Capone was indicted for 22 counts. Oh my goodness. I'm sorry, guys. I don't know what the fuck is wrong with me today. Let's try that one again. June 5th, 1931, Capone was indicted for 22 counts of federal income tax evasion for the years of 1925 to 1929. 4 years, 22 counts. All right then. June 12th, 1931, Capone and others were charged with conspiracy to violate prohibition laws for the years of 1922 to 1931. In October 1931, Capone was found guilty on 3 out of 23 charges and sentenced to 11 years in prison and $50,000 fine, plus court costs. The man at the age of 28 was worth $100 million. $50K? Yeah, and? May 1932, Capone entered a prison in Atlanta and was then moved 2 years later, August 1934, to Alcatraz, the newly built Alcatraz. He was incarcerated in cell, apparently, I've put all my citations in, but if this is wrong, it's the only place I saw it, so I can't 100% confirm this, but it said he was incarcerated in cell 133 on B block in Alcatraz. I'd love to go to Alcatraz. I really would. I'd like to do like a ghost hunt there, even just a tour. I think it would be amazing. I also want to go all through California. Anyway, back to this. In November 1939, so he was incarcerated in 1932. In November 1939, November, 7.5 years, he was released from prison and transferred to a hospital in Baltimore. He went to a hospital in Baltimore, Maryland, suffering from the late stages of syphilis. He had syphilis from when he moved to Chicago, but he knew he could have treatment early, but he chose not to. He's like, Big Al, I don't need treatment for syphilis. Well, turns out you did, Big Al. Turns out you did. So he retired to Florida, where he died at the age of 48, January 25th, 1947. And in 1947, Al Capone was buried at Mount Olivet Cemetery in Chicago. But in 1950, 3 years later, his remains were transferred to a new grave at the Mount Carmel Cemetery in Hillside, Illinois. Could you imagine how many people were trying to unearth him or do bad things to his grave? I can't imagine. It's another thing I want to do is go visit like different grave sites. I love graveyards. I absolutely do. Something about them. Some of them are creepy as hell, but some of them are so peaceful. I mean, I guess it's peaceful knowing that all the bodies in there, I mean, besides the living human bodies, all the bodies are dead. So there's really nothing that they can do to you. Even the Al Capones that are under the earth. There's nothing that they can do to you. Okay, so here's some famous quotes from the man himself. Apparently. All of this is taken with a grain of salt, guys, because not knowing the person personally and knowing how many sleuths are out there, knowing how many people are putting information out online that people like me can gather, unless it's a source like, well, some of this is pretty true. It's from Britannica online, which is like dictionary and sourced and everything. But some of it is just shit I pulled off the internet. And so, again, just take it with a grain of salt. I didn't put all his quotes here that were listed. I kept the ones that really highlighted guns and murder and all that stuff, except for one. I kept those out. So let's go through it. There are 3 here. Quotes from Al Capone. I don't even know what street Canada is on. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Was he not referring to the country of Canada? Or is there a place in Chicago, in New York, or in Florida where the places he resided called Canada? Like, is it like a store? Is it a town? Is it or was he truly referring to the country of Canada? Because that would speak great volumes in my books. Anyway, second quote, Al Capone. A lawyer and his briefcase can steal more than 10 men with guns. I think that's true. Next. Don't mistake kindness for weakness. I am kind to everyone. But when someone is unkind to me, weak is not what you are going to remember about me. Well, dang. All right, then. Before we move on to media sensations, let me have a drink. All right. So, media sensations. There are many. Like, I'll show you guys. From, like, here down the page and the next page, okay? And that's not everything. I mean, I just picked from the list. Honestly, there are a lot. So let's go through a few of them here. Maybe I won't even read off all these, but I'll put them in the show notes in case you're interested. Okay. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre, of course, right? That would be the first one. 1967, the director, Roger Corman, starring Jason Robards Jr., Dick Miller, and Jack Nicholson. Scarface, 1983. The 1983 film is a loose remake on the 1932 Scarface film, which is based on the 1929 novel with the same name. The 1983 film stars Al Pacino. The Untouchables from 1987. Star-studded cast of Kevin Costner, Sean Connery, and Robert De Niro as Al Capone. Directed by Brian De Palma. So they're the three main ones. Now, some of the other ones, there's lots called Al Capone and Capone. Let's see. The Al Capone, there's a TV episode, a movie. Another one's a TV episode, a podcast, TV episode, TV episode, TV episode, episode. Okay. So let's go over all the TV episodes, starting with the oldest, Al Capone 1959. Then it was also, that was the movie Al Capone. The TV episodes go 1960, let's see here, 2007, 2017, 2019, 2017 again, 2021. Then we have Al Capone, the podcast, 2022, and another podcast episode in 2017, The Story of Al Capone, 2000, and that was in Great Crimes and Trials of the 20th Century. So there you go. And like I said, I'll post all this on in the show notes or in the show description for the video. And all the citations will be there as well if you wanted to look up any of my sources. But anyway, guys, that is Al Capone in all his glory. I wish you all the best. We are over 42 minutes of filming right now. I know I took a little break in the middle. And I'll adjust my times by, cutting and pasting a bit. We'll edit the shit out of this. But anyway, guys, until next week, when we're in the last week of February, what are we going to talk about? First, we talked about the word love. Then we talked about Valentine's Day. Today, it's all about Al Capone and the Valentine's Day Massacre. So what's next week? What can we discuss? Let's think about it. I got nothing right now, but I'll have something for you next week. Take care. See you, friends.